Hey Denchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and you guys seem to like it when I wear nice clothes. You guys seem to give more thumbs ups on my reviews when I wear nicer clothes. So today I'm going to be reviewing the debut album from Tut Tut Child. This is called Come to the End, then Stop. And as you know, I'm a Monster Cat fan, so obviously I'm going to have to give a full review on this sucker. And I've actually been a Tut Tut Child fan a bit longer than I've been a Monster Cat fan. I first found out about Tut Tut Child when he had opened for Knife Party on one of their EP release parties online. Now, Tut Tut Child's been one of the basic original dubstep producers on Monster Cat, and lately has been kind of going into a little bit more of an alternative rock kind of sound, I guess you could say. But at times he's still gone back to his dubstep roots. One of my favorite tracks by him, Drop That Child, is on one of my favorite Monster Cat albums, 015. He's also released some pretty awesome singles, like on my favorite Monster Cat album, 017, Drink Up, and the incredible Breathe with Danica Nadeau on 020. Now, in large part, I've never been a huge fan of Tut Tut Child's larger works. He has released numerous EPs by now, but there's usually only a couple tracks I tend to like from them, typically only one or two. And with his debut album, I was actually hoping for something absolutely mind-blowing. I thought Tut Tut Child was absolutely going to deliver, and for the most part, he seems to on this album. Now with the concept of this thing, I'm not entirely sure where he's going. Like I said, he's been going toward more of an alternative rock sound, so for the sake of this review, I'm kind of going to rate this from a standpoint of how good of a rock album is this, like an electronic rock album, because honestly this thing could be taken either way. It's not really even an EDM album, I'd say, kind of going toward Pendulum and the Prodigy sounds a little bit more than your standard Monster Cat EDM. So this is probably the most rocky, other than maybe Variants, which is a little more orchestral sounding piece that we've heard yet on Monster Cat's array of albums. Now, one of the primary things that really got me hyped for this album was the lead single off it, Talking of Axes, featuring Jim Davies of, you guessed it, The Prodigy, and Jim Davies was kind of in charge of making the guitar riffs for singles like Breathe and Firestarter, two of my favorite Prodigy tracks. And honestly, the vibe I'm getting from this thing is so strong. It's a really awesome breakbeat track. The guitar riff on this is absolutely infectious. It's got a kind of pendulum-centric melody, and I think this one could have passed for an awesome pendulum track. I'd love to see Tut Tut Child work with them in the future, maybe on their new release. That would be really cool, especially seeing an artist from The Prodigy come on to Monster Cat was one of the coolest things about this record. I might as well just get out my feelings about all three of the singles, or the Monster Cat singles on this album. Next up came Fell Down, which I guess I couldn't really call a disappointment, but it's kind of an oddball in this album in terms that it's dubstep, and it's not necessarily the best dubstep I've ever seen Tut Tut Child do. He's delving into a little bit more of rock sounds with this one, but honestly it's not too impressive on dubstep standards or rock standards. This one's got some really cool breaks in it, but honestly I didn't think it was the best or even close to the best for Monster Cat standards or for Tut Tut Child. Not one of my least favorites on the album, but definitely not one of my favorites. And then finally, of the Monster Cat singles, let's talk about Queen of Your Heart featuring Augustus Ghost. I've got to give a round of applause, I'll just do it real quick right here, to Tut Tut Child for being able to write a dance song in 5/4 time. I think Tut Tut Child's motive behind making this track in 5/4, from what I've heard, is a little bit less egotistic. I guess he wrote it in this form to be a little bit more free and artistic rather than just being a little bit egotistical, like I said. And I think for the most part that's really cool. And I actually really love the instrumental on this track. I think it's the instrumental makes it one of the best productions on the album. But I do have to say, I did hear Tut Tut Child really praising Augustus Ghost for being able to write a vocal in 5/4 time. Honestly, I don't think the vocal line is impressive at all. I don't think it's nearly close to Augustus Ghost's best work, and could have used a lot of work. This one's got a lot of cheesy lyrics that are very card-centric. Obviously with a title like Queen of Your Heart, it's going to. But I think if the vocals were cut out of this one, it would have been a lot cooler of a track. I would have appreciated this much more as an instrumental. Just my opinion. Don't get too upset at me about that, because it isn't one of my least favorites on the album. I just think the vocal took away from something that was really special originally. Another major pick I have with this album is the fact that the production seems very disconnected from the vocals at points and from the instrumentation, because we've got a lot of electric guitar talent on this, we've got a lot of varying instruments throughout this, and I feel like the production, especially drum-wise, is very, very disconnected. If he did record the drums himself, they're very clearly beat matched, and everything sounds very unnatural with the natural sounding live instrumentation, so that's very distracting for me. On other hands, we've got your standard dance tunes like Eat Me, which takes on a little bit more of a classic Monster Cat electro sound, maybe a little bit closer to Stephen Hawking's style. Oracle is kind of giving me the vibe, it's pretty chill, but it's getting vocally is giving me the same kind of vibes that Daft Punk's Random Access Memories went. It's very down-tempo in terms of that, but by any stance I don't think it matched nearly to as good as Daft Punk's last album went, using the vocals in the same kind of way. It sounds very unfitting for this track. Just a Dream featuring Tasha Baxter is, I'll admit, one of the cooler tracks on the record, especially using that rock influence. Like I said, the percussion on this is very disconnected, but I did like the other instrumentation featured on this one, and it does sound like a solid attempt at a rock song. Autonomy featuring Danica Nadeau is once again one of my favorites on the record, and Tut Tut Child seems to do a good job at this, wrapping up the album with a few good tracks, which I was really impressed with. Honestly, I think one of the coolest things about this track is the vocal chops on it, and it's just a very chill, laid-back track, and I think one of Danica's best appearances thus far, especially on Tut Tut Child standards. I did like Breathe a little better, but this is a cool track too. The Evidence, Tut Tut Child once again brings a little bit of a harder sound that we heard in Talking of Axes. This one, I don't think the production is immensely good, but it's just such a fun track, you can't seem to dislike it, I don't think. It's one of the cooler, harder tracks on the record, and definitely a way to nearly wrap up the record. Finally closing off with You Hide, one of my other favorites from the record. Unlike Queen of Your Heart, I think Augusta's ghost vocals on this one were extremely fitting, and probably one of the best appearances I've heard her sing ever. This one's a very cool way to finish up the album, really chill track. I'm feeling this one quite a bit. As opposed to a lot of the record, I think this one, the instrumentation went extremely well with the production. Everything just flows very well together and makes an awesome closer. This album's pretty solid. I'm definitely not going to praise it as much as a lot of Monster Cat fans are, just as well as the Fractal album, when a lot of Monster Cat fans were calling it absolutely beautiful. I'm getting the same kind of vibes of that with this one. I don't think it's either of their best work. I think Tut Tut Child could have done better, but this is a solid attempt, and I do appreciate his use of live instrumentation and production on this one. Has definitely improved from his previous works. This is probably even better than some of his older EPs, and I am a big fan of his more dancey stuff, but I think this is a solid step in the right direction. I just think on a few tracks it tended to, especially on judging it from a electronic rock standard, I think this one fell a little flat. So I'm going to give this one a 5.5. Please don't hate me. It seems whenever I give any kind of negative comments about anything, I tend to get a ton of dislikes. So this is just my opinion. By any means, I've changed the description, if you guys haven't noticed, to something completely different because I want it to look less hateful and less brash than previously. I really like the new format. I hope you guys do too. Anyway, I hope you guys have somehow enjoyed what I've had to say about Tut Tut Child's debut album, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.